My name is James Walker. I'm a Christian apologist, but even though I'm a Christian, I still learn from Atheist Edge.
Did a man named Moses lead 2 million Hebrews out of Egypt after 430 years of captivity? The answer is a resounding no. So this one's pretty easy. There's just no evidence for it. Like, if there were that many people in slavery, an entire nation of Israel in slavery to Egypt, there'd be evidence. Archaeological evidence, like physical, literal, like not arguments from some obscure philosophy, but actual evidence. And it's not there. So they spend a lot of time teaching from Moses too, at least in my experience, particularly things like the Passover, the plagues of Egypt, the Ten Commandments being delivered at Mount Sinai, the faithfulness that was described by Moses in facing the Pharaoh, and yet it didn't happen. So nothing was found in terms of archaeological evidence, but we'll go through some of these points. We'll read through some of these points in a bit more detail. I'll be first to admit that the historical and archaeological history of Egypt and the Israelites isn't a big thing in terms of my history or my expertise. However, I can tell you with great certainty that despite having done 2 years at a biblical theological college, actually doing a degree in theology, it was not at all included in terms of apologetics or hermeneutics when discussing these particular parts of the Bible and, hammering home the idea of them being literal, real events, despite the fact that they were taught as such. So we'll go through these, we'll read these out. So the population of Egypt at that time was around 7 million. Hebrew slaves would have made up a third of the nation's population. With a percentage this high, one would think that there would be an abundance of archaeological evidence, yet there is none. So, as I've already mentioned, and it's a very common criticism of the contention that there was such a big slave population there. There are no Egyptian records of anyone owning or buying a single Hebrew slave. There is absolutely zero historical evidence of an angel killing all the firstborn males in Egypt. Again, two things, particularly the owning and buying of slaves. To my understanding, the Egyptians kept pretty good records, including administrative records of things that were happening. So to not see any evidence of that is just stunning. Like, it really hammers home that it's very unlikely that any of this happened. And the same with an event that kills all the firstborn of the nation of Egypt. Nation's probably not the right term when you're talking that long ago, but we expect to see corroborating records of such a huge event. So not one piece of archaeological evidence has been found supporting the claim that the Hebrews traveled across the Sinai Peninsula. No graves, no trash, no tools, nothing. Contrast this with the fact that single Bedouin campsites dating back to thousands of years ago have been uncovered. Now that again is fascinating, because we see small settlements or small houses or farms or collectives of people much smaller than the apparent size of the population of the Israelites, and we find evidence of that, but we don't find evidence of this massive 40-year migration across, not a very large piece of land, in all honesty. Maybe the manna from heaven didn't leave behind trash and they didn't need tools because it was just supplied to them, but I find it hard to believe, which is why we're here. Surprise, surprise. When the Hebrews allegedly reached their destination, they would have discovered the land of Canaan during that time period was occupied by a massive advance force of Egyptian armies. Funny that. These are all it's just mounting evidence to the contrary that this actually took place. The biblical accounts of the Exodus were written in a version of Hebrew that wasn't developed until 500 to 700 years after the Exodus supposedly took place. Certainly long enough for stories to become mythical and, not necessarily based in reality. So, I guess the main point is that, these things are able to be investigated. Like we can look at the claims of the Bible, and we can actually then go and investigate the historical records and archaeological records that exist, because we can go back that far in terms of what we can find evidence for, and we don't find evidence for these claims, for these events, or for these people to be in the place that they supposedly were in. So that seems like a pretty good case to me, and unlike some other forms of pseudoscience that get pushed by some types of Christianity, the mysterious absence of records for Israelites in Egypt doesn't seem to be one of them.
But you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, being small among the clans of Judah, out of one will come forth to me, that is the ruler in Israel, whose goings forth are from the old, from everlasting. Christians are quick to point out that Jesus fulfilled the Old Testament prophecy, but let's take a closer look. Bethlehem, in the city of David, which is a region in Judah, Ephrathah means fruitful, refers to a tribe, not a city. Its patriarch is a man named Ephrathah. The ruler is predicted to be a military leader who defeats Assyria when he comes into our land, when he treads on our borders. So as a lifelong Christian, I can tell you that Old Testament prophecy is referenced in the New Testament to prove that the prophecy came true. But in this particular instance, the prophecy was referenced in the New Testament, but never existed in the Old Testament. That's a big question.
You may marry your daughters-in-law. All right, so this one comes from the Quran, and I'm not super familiar with the Quran, so I'm going to go ahead and read the section that this comes from. This is I'll be reading Yusuf Ali's English translation of the Quran, Surah 33 here, as Jim has referenced it. Behold, thou didst say to one who had received the grace of Allah and thy favor, retain thou in wedlock thy wife, and fear Allah. But thou didst hide in thy heart that which Allah was about to make manifest. Thou didst fear the people, but it is more fitting that thou shouldst fear Allah. Then when Zayd had dissolved his marriage with her with the necessary formality, we joined her in marriage to thee, in order that in future there may be no difficulty to the believers in the matter of marriage with the wives of their adopted sons, when the latter have dissolved with the necessary formality their marriage with them. And Allah's command must be fulfilled. All right. So what does this have to do with anything? Why is this even in the Quran? And who's Zayd? This verse appears to have come about because of a particular situation, a story that we have handed down about the Prophet Muhammad and one of his wives or one of his close friends. In Muhammad's household, when he first received his revelation from the angel Jibril, his wife was one of the first converts, but they also had a slave in the household named Zayd, who converted as well. So he became a Muslim and was a close friend and one of the quote-unquote companions of the Prophet, and was very close with him militarily, helped him with his military campaigns. And apparently at one point, the Prophet Muhammad had arranged for Zayd to marry one of Muhammad's own cousins, a woman named Zainab. And for whatever reason, the marriage didn't work out. Either Zayd and Zainab were not compatible, or there's one story that comes that says that Muhammad happened to see Zainab when she was not completely dressed, and thought that she looked really attractive and wanted her as his wife. And since Zaid didn't want her as his wife, actually, that he decided that he would, he was trying to take her, but was worried about what people would say. Wait a minute, this is Zaid. This is your close companion. And in fact, a lot of people considered Zaid to be an adopted son of Muhammad, or like a son to Muhammad. Some people refer to him as Zaid bin Muhammad because of that. And so it was very awkward socially and culturally. Why would you marry the wife of your son or adopted son? That looks weird and looks goofy. And so this verse is basically saying, well, look, Allah says it's okay in this particular instance for Muhammad to marry. The cousin thing doesn't seem to get mentioned, but the fact that she was the wife of his adopted son, that's the sticking point. So Allah said, I want to be sure that nobody worries about marrying the ex-wives of their adopted sons. So I'm going to have you do it, Muhammad, because as we all know, if Muhammad does something, that must mean it's a good thing to do, and that must mean it's okay. And so that becomes an object lesson for this very specific situation that I can't imagine happens very often, or happened very often. I don't know. Maybe it did. Maybe people always wanted to marry their sons' wives back then or in that place. I don't know. It seems like a foreign idea to me, but that's the explanation for that. And as with Joseph Smith, his peculiar interest in polygamy was was brought into the Mormon theology. So this particular situation with Allah and Zainab has been brought into the Quran, and there it is in black and white, and it's kind of stuck there, whether you like it or not.
Now, the part about David giving his future father-in-law 200 foreskins. I heard a joke one time. Somebody said, if you account for all the supposedly foreskins from Jesus' circumcision, there's a different word for it in Hebrew, but that you could make the rings of Saturn that were sold as as relics. It's kind of like the true cross would stretch all the way across the earth, and all the slivers of wood from the true cross. So the foreskins are the same way. Why on earth that would have been considered a gift? I guess, again, from our brutal ancestors, the fact that we evolved from apes, that we are apes, or we are monkeys, actually, and it just shows that, what we considered important at that time was clan strength, clan power, and the more power or strength a man had, and to be able to get the foreskins off of all these Philistines, I think it didn't say in the thing, but I think that's what he supposedly got, Philistine foreskins. I guess maybe they were, oh yeah, it does say it. Maybe they were worth more than Hebrew, but who knows? It's not like they came stamped with names. He could have just gone around and gotten a bunch from all the little boys there in the camps and that were being, or the villages that were being circumcised. But why that genital mutilation in the first place, to me, is like, shows that your God screwed up and made babies imperfect, so you have to improve upon the design. And I think it started with God about to destroy Moses, and Moses' wife cuts off the foreskin of the baby and throws it at his feet, which it's just, I'm against genital mutilation of either male or female. If they want to have it done for medical or aesthetic, because that's really all it does, reasons when they get older, it should be a choice done by a consenting adult with all the knowledge about it and information about it.
So creationism is an embarrassment, a religious superstition that does real harm to children. It's a symptom of willful ignorance and anti-intellectualism that thwarts scientific progress. Bill Nye.
Let's look at another prophecy, popular prophecy that Christians are fond of, pulled out of the arsenal of the dashed hopes. So the Old Testament prophecy, and they, Israel, shall look at me, Yahweh, whom they have pierced. Then they, Israel, shall mourn for him, the figurative people of Israel who will die in battle, as one mourns for an only son. The New Testament fulfillment is they, the Gentile nations, shall look upon him, Jesus, whom they have pierced. When they view this context, we can clearly see that the anonymous author of John was grasping at straws in a futile attempt to fulfill an ancient prophecy. You know, when you look through the timetables of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and then you look through the timetables of the Old Testament, even the timetables don't match. So if it's a prophecy in the New Testament that you can't find in the Old Testament, it definitely leaves you with a lot of questions.
Oh, the feeding of the multitudes, that's told twice in two different Gospels. It's twice in Mark and twice in Matthew. And neither are the same. They contradict each other. And the weird thing is the fact that after the first feeding, there's another one just a few chapters later, and the apostles are all so surprised Jesus could make all this food out of this little tiny amount. Why would they be surprised the second time? That doesn't even make sense. But then neither does anything else in the Bible. But the Bible, I noticed, when you read it, the whole thing along, it's all repetition, repetition, and repetition. And that's the way people learned, because these were, by the time they were written down, they were just oral traditions. And everybody who came in, got conquered, got brought in, got converted, they brought their own God beliefs and their own stories. And so that's why we find all these mishmash stories. And then when they codified the Bible, this is my opinion anyway, and I'm not a scholar certainly, but you guys can ask Josh or from Digital Hammurabi or something. But my opinion is that that's why we see like the two stories of the creation of Adam and Eve in Genesis. You see lots of mixes where they have it's like they're trying to mash in two stories to fit each other.